My name is Madeline Carter. I'm 19 years old. Have you ever felt watched in your own home, silenced, doubted, and stripped of control? If stories about breaking free from manipulation, reclaiming your truth, and surviving betrayal speak to you, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe, because sometimes, the quietest voices carry the most powerful stories. And mine is just one of many. And I used to think my parents were just careful, protective, the kind of people who always double-checked locks and kept the blinds shut at night. Overbearing? Sure. Controlling? Sometimes. But never cruel, never dangerous. At least, that's what I told myself. It started small, little things. I began to feel like I was always being watched, but not in the metaphorical, paranoid teenager kind of way. This was different. I'd feel it when I changed clothes in my room, when I brushed my teeth, even when I cried myself to sleep. There was a weight in the air, like someone else was in the room with me. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself I was just stressed. Finals were coming up. I was stuck at home for winter break, and my relationship with my parents, especially my dad, had grown colder by the week. He'd stopped knocking before entering. My mom stopped asking how my day was. They were polite, civil, but something was off, like they were acting, like they were waiting. Then came the night I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was around 11 p.m. I'd just taken a shower and was standing in front of the mirror brushing my hair when I noticed it, a tiny red flicker behind the bathroom vent. Barely visible. It could have easily been a reflection, a light from outside, but something about it made my skin crawl. I got closer. I leaned in. That's when I saw it, a small pinhole lens, tucked inside the vent cover, right next to the fan. Blinking. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just froze. My heart dropped into my stomach. I stared at it, and it stared back. The next morning, I went on a quiet hunt through the house. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just wanted to prove to myself that it was nothing, that I was overreacting. That somehow, that camera was an accident. A toy, a leftover from some security project. But then I found another one, behind the clock on my bedroom wall. And another, embedded in the bookshelf in the living room. And the worst one, hidden inside the stuffed bear I'd had since I was 10. It had been sitting on the corner of my bed for years. Turns out, someone had unstitched the seam, planted a tiny lens inside the bear's eye, and sewn it back up. The needlework was neat, clean, professional. I wanted to throw up. I didn't tell anyone, not yet, not my best friend, not the police, not even my mom, because by then, I wasn't sure if she wasn't involved. I just sat in my room that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was trapped inside some twisted version of The Truman Show. Every move I'd made, every breakdown, every private moment, every tear I thought I cried alone, it had all been recorded. For what? For who? And worst of all, for how long? That night, my dad knocked on my door. He hadn't knocked in months. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" he asked, voice calm, too calm. "You've been quiet lately." I told him I was fine. I smiled. I thanked him. I shut the door gently. And then I sat back down, staring at the little red light glowing faintly through the bear's eye. They were recording me, watching me, and now, I was sure they were waiting to see how I'd react. So I didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't rip the cameras out. I didn't run to the police. Instead, I started planning, because if they wanted a performance, they were about to get one. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, constantly being watched. But I also couldn't react, not yet. Those cameras weren't just randomly placed. They were deliberate, almost like someone was building a case against me. That terrified me more than the invasion itself. So I became perfect. I woke up early, made my bed, smiled when my parents spoke, never talked back. I played the role of the changed daughter. And all the while, I knew they were watching, recording, waiting. Behind the scenes, I started looking for answers. My first step was reaching out to my grandfather, Charles Carter, the only family member who still treated me like a person after my near expulsion last year. He lived alone just outside town, barely used technology, and never trusted my parents' obsession with control. I told him part of the truth, not about the cameras, just that something felt off, like my parents were hiding something. And I needed help figuring it out. He looked at me for a long moment, part concern, part suspicion, then finally nodded. That's when he told me something that made my stomach turn. Years ago, my father was quietly investigated for secretly monitoring and manipulating employees at his company. The case never went public, it was handled internally. But Grandpa cut all business ties with my father after that. He said, "Your dad stopped seeing people as people a long time ago. This wasn't about worry. This wasn't even just about control. My father had done this before. And gotten away with it." I went home that night sick to my core. But I kept up the act. Smiled, studied, sat at the dinner table like nothing had changed. Then, I quietly pulled an old laptop from our garage, one my dad had tossed years ago, and took it to a computer repair shop. I told the guy the first needed a full backup of the hard drive onto an external device. An hour later, he came back, holding the drive, his face pale. "Did you know there's hundreds of hours of surveillance footage on here?" I didn't answer. I just nodded and told him I needed it all copied, no traces left on their systems. That night, I sat in my bedroom with the lights off and headphones in, watching video after video. And it wasn't just me. There were other girls. A neighbor who used to babysit me. A friend from school. Random visitors caught on hidden cameras in our kitchen, hallway, even my bedroom. Going back to when I was 14. Each file had a date, a timestamp, a notes section labeled observation. This wasn't parental concern. This was criminal. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I threw up. I didn't sleep. But the next morning, I came down to breakfast like nothing had happened. Smiled at Mom, said I was going for a walk in the park. I didn't go to the park. I went straight to Helen Brooks, an attorney my grandfather trusted, a retired prosecutor who once specialized in domestic abuse and privacy rights. I handed her the hard drive and sat frozen as she started scanning through the files. After a few minutes, she looked up at me, pale, shaking. "Madeline, this isn't just illegal. This is prosecutable." I nodded. "I know. But I don't want this to disappear like the last time." We started building a case, quietly, carefully, no local police. Helen went straight to the FBI. Because this wasn't just about me. It involved others, maybe even across state lines. I hadn't told my mom yet. I wasn't even sure if she was part of it or just another person being watched like I was. But one thing I knew for sure, I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. A few days later, Helen called me in urgently. The FBI had just recovered a new file auto-synced from one of my father's devices, a voice recording. In it, my father was speaking to another man about setting up an incident to have me committed for psychiatric evaluation. They didn't just want to control me. They wanted to erase me. That night, I stayed at Grandpa's house. And I never set foot in my parents' home again. The night I moved into Grandpa's guest room, I slept with one eye open and a kitchen knife under my pillow. Paranoid? Maybe. But when you hear your own father plotting to have you institutionalized, not for help, but to silence you, trust doesn't come easily. The FBI told us to lay low. They were building their case. Helen said they'd already flagged multiple hidden surveillance devices, unauthorized data sharing, and violations of both state and federal laws. But that wasn't enough to stop him yet. Because he was smart. Because he was powerful. Because he had done this before, and slipped through the cracks. I kept thinking, what if he knows? What if he realizes I took that drive? 2 nights later, we found out he did. It was around 1:47 a.m. I remember the time exactly because I had just rolled over to check my phone. That's when I saw it, headlights at the end of Grandpa's driveway. A black SUV. No plates, engine running, but no one got out. I tapped Grandpa awake. He looked out the window, cursed under his breath, and quietly called Helen. She told us to stay inside, keep lights off, and don't engage. A few minutes later, the SUV peeled off. The next morning, Grandpa's mailbox had been ripped open. No mail inside, and his home Wi-Fi had been jammed overnight. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was war. The FBI moved faster after that. They requested emergency warrants, dug deeper into my father's financials, personal drives, and business records, and what they found turned a twisted family secret into a full-blown federal case. Turns out, I wasn't the only one with hidden footage. There were dozens of other girls, babysitters, interns, classmates, some who had no idea they were being filmed. And worse, the footage was being archived and distributed through encrypted private networks tied to shell companies under my dad's name. I couldn't breathe when I heard it. I couldn't stop shaking. It wasn't just about controlling me. It was predatory. It was systemic, and it had gone on for years. Grandpa tried to keep me calm, but nothing helped. I kept replaying the moments in my head, the times I had danced alone in my room, the nights I cried myself to sleep, the showers, the dressing, all of it, captured, stored, possibly shared. That level of betrayal isn't something you just move past. It cracks your soul wide open. Helen told me we were approaching a point of no return. If we wanted justice, not just protection, we'd need to testify. We'd need to go public. And I'd be the key witness. At first, I refused. I wasn't ready. I didn't want the world to know what had been taken from me. But then something shifted. A girl I barely remembered, Emily Harper, a former tutor from years ago, contacted Helen's office. She'd just discovered she, too, had been recorded at our home. Her message? Tell Madeline she's not alone. If she speaks, I'll speak too. That was the moment everything inside me snapped into focus. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every girl he had silenced. Every woman who had been watched, studied, and discarded like a project. I said yes. We recorded my statement 2 days later in a secure location. I laid out everything. The blinking red light in the vent. The recovered laptop. The drive. The fake incident plan. The SUV. The mailbox. All of it. I cried. I shook. I had to pause a dozen times. But I got through it. Because silence was no longer an option. 1 week later, the FBI executed a coordinated raid. My father was arrested at his office. Computers, drives, and servers were seized. News broke across state lines. It made headlines. Prominent CEO faces federal charges in hidden surveillance ring. Daughter's evidence cracks open privacy crimes network. Reporters camped outside Grandpa's house. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly reached out with apologies. Stories, support. But I didn't want fame. I didn't want pity. I just wanted the truth, ugly, brutal truth, to finally have a voice. I never imagined I'd be standing in court, just a few feet away from my own father, telling a room full of strangers, and millions watching online, that he had secretly recorded me for years. But that's exactly what happened on May 17th. My name is Madeline Carter. I'm 21 years old, and I was the key witness in a federal trial against the man who once taught me how to drive, signed my dance recital forms, and called me his little girl. That man, Dr. Franklin Carter, age 63, CEO of a well-known family-run tech company, was now facing 17 criminal charges, illegal surveillance, distribution of private content without consent, and operating a covert data network through one of his shell companies. I wore a plain white blouse, no jewelry, hair tied back. Helen, my attorney, said, "We're not here to impress. We're here to tell the truth." I took the stand. The courtroom fell silent. I saw him. No anger, no shame, just nothing. It was like he had erased me from his memory. The government's attorney asked the expected questions: where I found the surveillance devices, how I discovered the footage, and what was on the hard drive. I answered clearly, firmly, even though my hands were clenched and my legs trembled under the witness box. Then came the part one hadn't prepared for: cross-examination by his defense attorney. She was sharp, calculated, and she had one goal: to make me look crazy, emotional, or confused. "Ms. Carter, have you ever received psychiatric treatment? Why didn't you speak to your father before going to the FBI? Can you say for sure that those devices were placed by the defendant, and not someone else?" I took a breath. Each question felt like a jab. But I didn't flinch. I said, "I'm not here to guess. I'm here because I lived through it." I recounted the moment I saw that blinking red light inside my air vent. The nausea I felt when I realized the most private moments of my life had been stored, encrypted, and passed around like merchandise. I didn't cry, not that day. Because that day wasn't for tears. That day was for the truth. In the days that followed, witness after witness took the stand. Emily Harper, an old classmate, a single mom who used to be his executive assistant, a former IT contractor. Each of them said the same things. The devices were hidden in the same places. The footage followed the same encryption pattern. Whenever someone got too close, or tried to quit, the devices would magically disappear or get repaired. Then came the bombshell. The FBI presented their forensic report. In one of the encrypted drives seized from Franklin's office, they found over 4.200 hours of hidden surveillance footage, all recorded, cataloged, and protected by custom software created by Carter Tech. And it wasn't just me. It wasn't one or two women. It was at least 31. Some were as young as 17 at the time of filming. My father never reacted, not once, not even when I testified. But my grandfather, Robert Carter, 78, came to every hearing. He sat in the front row and held my hand during breaks. He told me, "You're not just speaking for yourself, Maddie. You're standing up for the girls who weren't strong enough yet. You're not a victim anymore. You're the one breaking the silence." On the last day of the trial, Helen asked me if I wanted to leave early. I had the right, but I shook my head. I wanted to stay. I needed to hear the verdict for myself. When the jury returned, it took them just 47 minutes. Guilty, all 17 counts. Recommendation, maximum sentencing. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in months, I felt safe. This isn't the end. I'll probably need therapy for years. There will be nights I cry for no reason. There may always be a part of me that looks over my shoulder. But here's what I know for sure. I'm not living in fear anymore. And no matter what happens from here, the truth is out. And I, Madeline Carter, am still standing. They said recovery would feel like climbing a mountain blindfolded. They weren't wrong. After the trial ended, the cameras turned off, the headlines faded, but I was still here. Still waking up at 3 a.m. in cold sweats. Still checking every ceiling corner for a blinking light. Still hesitating before opening drawers, closets, vents. My name is Madeline Carter, and I'm now 22. And this is what it looked like to rebuild from nothing. I moved out of state. Quiet town, new zip code, no Wi-Fi for the first 3 weeks. I didn't tell neighbors my last name. Didn't decorate my apartment. I barely spoke to the barista I saw every morning. But slowly, the silence felt less suffocating. I started writing again, just for me. I'd forgotten what it was like to not be watched. I remember standing in front of a mirror one morning, holding a cup of black coffee, thinking, they broke the law, not me. I didn't do anything wrong. That moment changed everything. I started therapy, real therapy. Not those court-mandated sessions or crisis hotlines. Actual sessions, with a soft-voiced woman named Dr. Marissa Lane, who never once looked at me like I was broken. She asked once, "What's the one thing you wish someone had told you sooner?" I said, that survival isn't shameful. That being manipulated doesn't make you weak. That it's okay to be angry. We unpacked every layer of guilt I had been carrying, the self-blame, the silence, the moments I froze instead of fighting back. And week by week, I stopped apologizing for surviving. The real surprise came from strangers. Women, and some men, started reaching out online. A girl from Arizona messaged, "My uncle used to install baby cams around our house. I thought I was overthinking, but after your story, I'm going to the police." A mother in Boston wrote, "My daughter saw your interview. She finally told me why she hasn't slept in her room for months." I never set out to become a voice for anyone. But something happened the day I stood in that courtroom and said, "This happened to me, and I won't be silent." It was like opening a dam. Thousands of others said, "Me too." I got offered podcast interviews, a book deal, even a streaming docuseries. But I turned most of it down. Not because I was scared, but because I needed to live a life that wasn't just about what happened. I enrolled in night classes, started a support group for digital abuse survivors, volunteered at a youth center, teaching girls how to recognize digital red flags and protect their privacy. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just reacting to pain. I was building something from it. Last week, I walked past a little girl on a bike. She looked about 8, curly hair, chipped nail polish. She smiled and said, "Your shoes are cool." It sounds small, but that smile? It felt like sunlight after a decade of rain. I bent down and said, "Thanks, I like yours too." And just like that, I felt human again. So no, I didn't fall apart. I didn't disappear. They thought I would crack under pressure. That I'd be too scared, too embarrassed, too damaged to move forward. But I didn't just survive. I began again. And that's power they can't ever take back. I don't know who you are, where you're reading this from, or what brought you here. Maybe you're sitting in a quiet room, your phone lighting up the night. Maybe you just went through something you still don't have the words for. Maybe you're still smiling like nothing's wrong, but inside, everything's falling apart. I wrote this for you. They say, time heals all wounds. I don't agree. Time just moves. You are the one who decides how to live with the pain. You are the one who chooses whether it defines you, or teaches you how to rise stronger. For me, it wasn't waking up one day and suddenly being okay. It was waking up hundreds of mornings and getting out of bed even when I didn't want to. It was shaking as I tried to speak the truth. It was crying on nights I blamed myself, then learning how to forgive the girl in the mirror. I used to wish I'd never met them. That I never stepped into that house. That I never trusted the wrong people. But now, I don't wish to forget. Because if I forget, I'd never be brave enough to help someone else remember they're not alone. I think about girls like me. The ones who never screamed because they were taught to keep the peace. The ones who got called too emotional when something didn't feel right. The ones who were made to believe that pain was the price of love. If you're one of them, I'm here to tell you, you're not crazy. Your feelings are real. Your gut, it's not lying to you. And if you've ever asked, do I deserve to be respected? To feel safe? To be heard? The answer is yes. Always yes. In one of my support groups, an older woman named June once told me, when they take your voice, you can either scream, or rebuild your words with a softness they'll never understand. I don't know why, but that stuck with me. I chose both. If you're standing in the middle of chaos right now, just know you don't need all the answers. You just need to keep breathing. Keep stepping, even if it's tiny. Text someone you trust. Write down how you feel, even if it makes no sense. Crack the window open. Pour yourself a glass of water. Sometimes the smallest actions are the biggest rebellions when you're trying to survive. I still get scared, still have nights I lie awake. But I no longer feel invisible. I'm not just a victim anymore. I'm a survivor, a storyteller, a girl rebuilding life on her own terms. If I could hug you right now, I'd whisper, I believe you, I see you, and you deserve a life that isn't built on someone else's cruelty. My story didn't end with a court sentence, a news headline, or a viral video. It ends each day, when I choose to live honestly. And it begins again, when I refuse to let them write any more of my chapters. So if you're still here, reading this, whether you're in the dark, or just stepping out of it, I want you to know. You are not the mistake. You are not the shame. You are not someone else's version of what broken looks like. You are a brand new chapter. You are the part no one's read yet. And that chapter, you get to write it.